Now, without further ado, so Sarah Sula, again, is our guest. She's a longtime HR professional. She is a proud graduate of the University of Richmond. She was class of 2010. She earned her undergraduate degree in HR management from UR, the School of Professional Continuing Studies. And currently she works at VCU Health System as an HR business partner. So I will let Sarah talk a little bit more about her background and experience, and then we'll go ahead and dive into our questions.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Becca. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Sula, and I'm an HR business partner at VCU Health, as Becca mentioned. I'm a graduate of U of R and the University of Scranton. I have an SPHR and a SHRM CP, and a lot of experience in a lot of different areas of human resources. And one of my favorite areas to work with is recruiting. So I'm very happy to be a guest here today and to answer any questions that you all have. And as Becca mentioned, we want this to be very interactive. So please feel free to ask any questions, for any clarification that you might need. We would love that.
Thank you, Sarah. So the first question that I have for you, Sarah, is the title of our event. So one of the main questions that I usually get from folks is about cover letters. Mm-hmm. It's usually the bane of people's existence when it comes to, just to be perfectly honest, when it comes to job searches and applications. It feels really frustrating, and a lot of people wonder, do people even read my cover letters if I put all this time into it? Mm-hmm. So in terms of, the hiring process, where do cover letters sort of fall in that, and are they really worth it?
So I would definitely say that a cover letter is worth it. So a resume or an online application is often sort of a short document, more of like a summary. And a cover letter is a way to help you stand out. And frankly, for most professional level positions, a cover letter is expected. And there are some organizations that won't even look at a resume if there is not a cover letter. A lot of people are pretty anxious about it because they say, well, what exactly is a cover letter? You've got my resume, you've got my application, you've got all the details you need. Your cover letter should be a nice, short summary document highlighting why your application is worth looking at and why you would be a good fit. It's a great place to maybe call out some things, projects that you've worked on, skill sets that you have directly related to the position you're applying for. It shouldn't be very long. I'd say 3/4 of a page to 1 page max. And you definitely do want to utilize things like bullet points, so it's not like an overwhelming, 5-paragraph filled document. But you should definitely consider using that, particularly for a higher level position, or one where you feel that your application maybe doesn't express just why you're a good fit. If you want to add that extra detail, the cover letter is an excellent place to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I've always sort of thought about that. So you had mentioned, actually, I'm going to ask sort of a follow-up question on that. So you had mentioned bullet points. So format wise, that's in terms of what I do in my career advising work. That's always something that I've been unsure about, how to advise people. So from the perspective of people that are, hiring managers, folks that are reading applications, are bullet points acceptable? Are they okay? Or are they looked at kind of oddly in a cover letter?
I think bullet points, in most cases, obviously different people have different preferences, but kind of from an HR industry perspective, bullet points are very welcome because it draws the attention to things that you want to bring focus to, that you want to catch the eye of the recruiter. Because what folks, I think, need to remember is that before it gets to that hiring manager, you have to get through HR or a recruiter. And so for them to be able to see your cover letter with a few very pertinent bullet points to catch their eye and to be able to briefly look at it and go, okay, great, this person has what we're looking for. They've got the skill set or they've got the experience, is so valuable.
Okay, thank you. That was always something that I was curious about. I think traditionally we're always told, no bullet points, but good to know that there's a little bit of flexibility in there. Mm-hmm. So my next question for you is about applicant tracking systems, which is, it's, if you, as a job seeker, if you know about them, they're very frustrating. And so for those of you on the call, if you're not sure what applicant tracking systems are, they are the software systems that scan application documents before they get to a person in the HR department. Which is often very frustrating for job seekers, because that's where folks feel like their applications get lost in the quote unquote black hole, and they don't ever get a response, even when they feel like they're very qualified for the role. So I want to talk a little bit, Sarah, about applicant tracking systems and how you work with them. So can you start off just explaining a little bit to us about, generally speaking, what they are and how they work?
Absolutely. So an applicant tracking system is typically, you'll see it in most companies. In some small organizations, they don't have something like that, but I would say 95+% of employers do use an applicant tracking system. And you'll usually recognize it when you're signing in. It'll be, UltiPro or Talent Compass or something like that. You'll see a name, ADP, Workday, things like that. So what an applicant tracking system does is it allows you to input your information and build a profile so that you're able to apply for positions, but it also serves the dual purpose on the employer's side for being a way to kind of screen through your application. So that's why language in things like your cover letter and your application are super important. You want to utilize the same keywords that you see in a posting, because the applicant tracking system is looking for those keywords. And it's going to, depending on the type of system, it may bump you up or it may flag you as a top candidate because it sees those words that it's looking for. So language is very important, particularly when dealing with an applicant tracking system. And so you want to make sure to kind of mirror that language that you do see in the posting. So having I know everyone has kind of a stock resume, right, that they use, or a stock cover letter that they have, but this is why customization is so important, making sure that if, for instance, the company that you're applying for uses certain language to describe a process or a system, if your resume and cover letter don't include those, you want to make sure that you go ahead and customize it to that, because again, it's going to help you get through that applicant tracking system and get you in front of human resources and the hiring manager. Yeah. It's going to help you stand out from the crowd.
Yeah. And in terms of standing out, so you had mentioned making sure that you're reflecting those keywords and phrases in the job description. I hear oftentimes from folks that I work with, the job seekers, that when they do this, it oftentimes feels like they're quote unquote cheating, or it just feels sort of weird to be doing that. So do you have any sort of like real-time advice on how can you do that effectively to get through the system, but without feeling like you're being disingenuous or you're sort of cheating?
Absolutely. And I've heard that concern a lot too. No one's asking you to, falsify or exaggerate or anything like that. It's just about using a common language. Think about if you're a very technical person and you're trying to explain something to a non-technical person, you might adapt your language to be more understandable to your audience, because that's what this really is it's knowing your audience. So if you're, for example, if a job is looking for experience with SAP reports, but your company called it something different, you want to make sure that you call out that this particular report that you used was an SAP report. So it's more about customization so that they can recognize what you're bringing to the table by using common language.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's about those, about the transferable skills and making it read. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about formatting for applicant tracking systems and how that works getting your documents through the system? Because I know, at least from what I've read and understand, there are certain formatting things that work better and certain things that the systems don't really like.
Absolutely. So again, all systems are a little bit different, but there are some common things. You want to make sure that you're using sort of a standard resume format. And it could be, chronological, it could be kind of skill-based, things like that. So it doesn't necessarily matter which type of resume you're putting together, as long as it's one that's going to be very readable by the system. So just kind of standard Word, using bullet points, things like that. Any applicant tracking system should be able to pick up on that. Some can even read PDFs, but you want to be very sure that whatever you're uploading is compatible with the system. So I often recommend, depending if it's an old system, I recommend if you have a resume that you have a copy as a PDF, that you have one as Word, and in some cases, if it's an older system, maybe even just kind of a plain text document without some of those special formatting things, just so that you are well prepared when you're applying for the job to have something that works with the company's standard. And once you submit it, if you have a way to look at it, once you've put it in to verify that the formatting came through, that is extremely important. And if you see that, hey, that PDF you uploaded didn't format correctly, go ahead and upload your Word document.
Okay, nice. That's really good advice. Because that's a question I get a lot too, is the format type. So obviously, if the directions on the application say, upload the PDF or give you specific directions, of course, but do you have a recommendation if they don't give specific directions on, should it be a PDF format that you upload?
If it doesn't give you specific instructions, I would actually recommend that you upload a Word document, just because that seems to be kind of the base standard for everybody. Some systems tend to garble PDFs. So I would definitely recommend, if all else fails and you're not sure what to do, go ahead and upload a Word document.
Okay, thank you. See, I learned something new today too. So I appreciate that. Awesome. So it looks like we have our first question in the chat. So I appreciate that, Laura. And by the way, out there in the audience land, please be thinking of your questions, and no question. I didn't say this earlier, but no question is a silly question. If you've got it, it's probably important. So Laura asks, how do you know what system the employer is using? Which is a great question. And what is old versus new?
Okay, so one of the easiest ways to tell what system a company is using is, obviously you'll apply through the website and you'll see sometimes that it redirects you. And for instance, like let's say VCU Health, to use my organization as an example. When you're starting the application process, you're going to see like ultipro.vcuhealth.org. So you're going to see it kind of usually in the URL to kind of get an idea about what kind of system they're using. You'll see Taleo or Ultipro or whatever that they have, or Workday, something like that. And as far as old versus new, you don't always know which one they're using. So again, if you're using it and it seems to be a little clunkier system, not very smooth, it doesn't allow you to maybe upload attachments, that's usually an indication that they're using an older system. And that's another reason that I recommend having a text, just a plain text version of your resume, because for some older systems, there's no way for you to upload a copy of your resume. You may have to cut and paste, and just having that plain text file ready to go for you to paste so that you're not panicking, trying to reformat at the last minute, is always a good idea.
Yes, you're right. Because if anybody in the audience is like me, maybe the last minute is your favorite minute to do things. So that's really good advice. Always have that ready. So thank you for that. I think that really helps to understand applicant tracking systems. I think there's a lot of job seekers that don't realize that they exist, and it's very frustrating. So thanks for breaking that down. I want to switch gears a little bit in terms of applications, what we were just talking about, sort of the other, one of the other sides of that. So after you submit an application, another question I get a lot of times in terms of the job search process is following up with applications. So there seems to be a lot of conflicting advice out there about this. So in your experience, and especially from the recruiting standpoint, what's appropriate follow-up? What does that look like?
So I'd say appropriate follow-up kind of depends on the position. As an example, some companies will put it out there on the job website that they don't accept follow-up emails. That's rare, but you do see it sometimes. So the first thing I would say is kind of take a look at what any expectations the organization may have laid out on that recruitment page. But most of the time, I would say within a week or so is an appropriate time to follow up. And depending on the type of system and how the company has chosen to format it, you can often see who the recruitment contact is. And I would definitely recommend email that person, reach out to them on LinkedIn, make that connection, because particularly in this kind of job market where there are a lot of people who are job seeking right now, bringing yourself to that person's attention is not a bad thing, because top of the mind, and they go, wow, that's great. Particularly if you follow up in a really professional way and you just want to check in or learn more about the position, it can definitely sort of move you to the top of the queue and help
Okay.
you stand out.
So it's not going to necessarily annoy a recruiter, because that's a response that I get quite a bit, is they're afraid they're going to annoy somebody.
I know a lot of people have, feelings about that. They're thinking, oh gosh, I don't want to annoy them. Absolutely not. Again, give maybe about a week or so if you haven't heard anything. And also, depending on the system, you may be able to log back in and see what the status of your application is, so that you can see, oh, you know what, my application hasn't been reviewed yet, or it has been reviewed. Let me follow up on that. That's a good kind of indicator to look at too. But one thing I do want to kind of discourage folks from is reaching out too frequently. It's never a bad idea to follow up, but maybe I feel like I don't need to say this, but I've seen it happen where people are emailing every single day or every other day, checking in on the status. And that probably is not going to be the best look for you as an applicant. So I would say, not do that.
Yeah, agreed. That's pretty solid advice. And in terms of when they do follow up, I mean, is the most appropriate thing just to check on the status of the application? I mean, anything else? I would imagine that's probably the most appropriate thing to do at that point, right?
Yeah, typically I would recommend that someone just, touch base and, reiterate who you are, what position you've applied for, and maybe even mention when you applied, and just say, I wanted to follow up and let you know that I'm still very interested in this position. And I wanted to see if you had any questions for me, if there's any information that I can provide to you. Just a really good way to, again, move you kind of to the top of the queue, show that you are engaged and show that you're interested. And again, particularly in a market like this where there are so many applicants, showing those things can make a huge difference in getting on the radar.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great to know. So we have another audience question. And again, please feel free to ask them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and you can come off mute and ask your questions of Sarah. But we did have one in the chat about cover letters. So going back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, how long, I think you talked a little bit about this, but how long do you suggest the cover letter to be? And in terms of structure of the cover letter, what do you recommend with that?
So for the cover letter, I would say at the most 1 page, but typically that's going to be a bit long for a cover letter. Many are about half page, 3/4 of a page, but it should never be more than 1 page. I can't think of an instance where that would be useful, because again, the cover letter is to kind of get the recruiter's attention and to maybe call out some key points, key skill sets that you might have. And as far as a format, as we've talked about, bullet points are okay, but I would definitely recommend that your cover letter, while you might have a standard template or format that you use, you do want to make sure in that cover letter that it is customized to the position, and that it mentions in the first paragraph, the first couple of sentences, what job you're applying for. I know that sounds like, oh, of course I know that, but many people don't. And you definitely want to call out, this is the position I'm applying for, brief summary of the qualifications. Again, you're not writing a novel, but you're just calling out why it is worth the recruiter's or the hiring manager's time to spend the time looking at your application and resume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, And one thing, what we always advise on as well with cover letters, and so, please confirm this or say that it's not true. But we always advise, looking at, so when you're looking at the job description, because I always say that that's your roadmap, right? Like the recruiter is telling you, this is what we need to see in successful candidates. So when you're looking through the job description, picking out the top like 2 to 3 skills or skill sets that they're asking for that you can, you essentially have the most evidence for, that you can prove the best that you have, and addressing that. And what I typically tell folks is to give specific examples of ways in which you've achieved those skills. So is that still something that you would recommend, say if it's project management is a skill that they're asking for, then, give a specific, maybe a complicated project that you managed and saw through to the end?
Absolutely. I would 100% agree with everything you said. Just as an example, let's say you're a project manager. You might want to mention as a bullet point or to call out somewhere in your cover letter that you have successfully managed X number of projects, or that you managed a project worth, $10 million or something like that. So to directly tie again to that job description, because it is the roadmap. That job posting is an exact list of everything they're looking to see. So anything that you can do to tie your resume and your cover letter into that is excellent.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So another question we have in the chat here. So about referrals in the job application. So I'm guessing probably in a cover letter somewhere, perhaps, or if they have a place in the portal for a referral. How does listing a referral in a job application work as far as carrying weight or throughout the HR process?
So referrals they can carry a lot of weight. So typically in most applications, if you're getting a referral from an internal person, you definitely want to put that in the application. If there's not a place for it in the application, the cover letter is an excellent place to put that in. I was referred to this position by so-and-so. But one thing I do want to caution folks on, please be sure about the person you're getting referred by, because depending on who that person is and what their position is in the company, maybe they're standing at the moment, it can hurt too. So you want to be very sure that if you are listing someone as a referral, that it's someone you feel very comfortable listing as a referral.
Okay. So I guess what do you mean by standing as somebody who's in good standing with the organization?
Correct. Like if, just to throw a crazy scenario out there, if you have someone who's maybe had some disciplinary issues with their organization or some performance issues, you really don't want to list them as being a referral for you. So just like if you were getting a reference for a job or something like that, if someone was calling for a reference, you want to be very careful about who you use as a reference. You want to think the same thing about a referral. Be very careful about who you're using.
Mm-hmm. Makes, good sense. But again, just probably really important to point out. Yeah, that was a really good question, Jody. Thank you. So I want to change gears a little bit. One thing that I have noticed quite a bit of going on out there in the workforce is either career switchers or folks re-entering the workforce for a variety of reasons. Maybe they had some expected or unexpected time off in the beginning of the pandemic. Maybe they have been a stay-at-home parent for a while, and now it's just time for them to re-enter. So I know there's a lot of things that go along and probably questions with re-entering the workforce or career switching. But in terms of those looking to re-enter, one thing that I get a question about a lot is, how do they talk about that gap in their employment? So can we talk a little bit about sort of like how honest one should be with a gap in employment, even if it was like, or how much information does the recruiter need to know about the gap, and sort of in application materials, like where should that be addressed?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question. And I know a lot of folks who are looking for jobs struggle with that. So just as an example, particularly with COVID and everything going on, there have been a lot of folks who have, changed careers, they've taken some time off, perhaps their position was eliminated or they were furloughed. You should absolutely include that in your application. For instance, if you have a year gap, please feel free to mention that. But what I would definitely recommend is that if you have a gap in employment, that you provide some information. It could be something like, I was going to school, or I was searching for careers, but I did some of these great webinars. I did these things to increase my skill set. There are a lot of transferable skills that you don't have to be formally working to get. So you can take that opportunity, that time frame, and list some of those things that you did, volunteer work that you may have done, things of that nature, that while they may not be directly job related, they are still very relevant, and it can show that what you were doing. So it's not just a random gap that they don't know how to address, because you're going to be asked. If you talk with the recruiter or you talk with the manager, they're going to ask. So it's good to kind of get that stuff out there and find something relevant to your career that you can perhaps tie it to, even if it's, for instance, exiting the workforce to be a stay-at-home parent. There are a lot of transferable skills for that, management of schedules and things of that nature. All of that stuff is very relevant. So please don't be afraid to put that in there. However, one thing I do want to caution you about, folks, is that you don't want to put anything in that kind of section or in your resume that could perhaps be something, not that I would say anybody would discriminate against you, but that perhaps we don't want to leave that door open, right? Like that if you left for a medical reason or something like that, perhaps you don't want to get into all of that. You don't want to provide too much detail.
Okay, because that's sort of, I've been asked that kind of question a lot, is how what's the depth that the recruiter needs? I guess like from the recruiting perspective, what's most important in talking about the reason for the gap? I mean, do they just, if it were a medical reason, do they just need to know I was out to address a medical issue, but I'm fine now?
I wouldn't even go into that kind of detail. Okay. What I would probably say, so depending on the kind of system that you're using, right? If there is, the formal application piece besides the resume that you're uploading, it's going to usually have dates and reason for leaving, organization. You can put a personal reason or something like that. But again, we don't really want to provide, for instance, to say I was out for medical leave. We don't necessarily want to give that information, because someone could say, oh gosh, this person has a medical issue. Have to think about that. And again, that's discrimination. We don't want to go down that road. So that's not necessarily information that we want to give. And also too, feel free to say that you're willing to discuss a gap in your employment. Happy to provide detail. And you can have that conversation once you get a little further in the process. That's not going to be something that's a deterrent for most hiring managers or for most HR people, because they understand that life happens. You might have had a sick parent. You might have decided to change careers and go back to school. There are many different circumstances. So don't feel like that's going to get you counted out. It absolutely isn't.
Okay, good to know. Yeah. So it sounds like it is really important to address the gap. But you can keep it very minimum in terms of right up front, but you can also say, like, I'm happy to talk about it, right?
Absolutely. And anything during that gap, even if it was reading industry journals to stay abreast of changes in your chosen industry, even if it was doing research about a career change that you wanted to make, call those things out, because everybody needs time to reset. And again, recruiters and managers completely understand that. And it can be extremely important if you're like a career changer, to kind of call out that you took this time to reset, to learn more about the industry, to get any additional education, certifications, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. I've also always sort of wondered about that, the depth of information. So thank you. Again, out there in audience land, if you all have questions, pop them in the chat or raise your hands. I hope that you are thinking of things that you're curious about from Sarah. I appreciate the questions that we have had so far. In terms of timing, if we don't make it to an hour, that's totally fine. And we can all get some time back in our day, but we do have an hour reserved if that's what we need. We've talked about a lot of really good sort of specific stuff, which I think is helpful for some folks, because those are definitely some questions that I hear a lot from job seekers. But I am curious to know just sort of overall, not necessarily now versus pre-pandemic, but just in general. And I know this might be a really broad question, so sorry, Sarah. But are there what can help applications move along? I mean, what are recruiters looking for? And I know that's a really broad question, might be kind of obvious, but I do get that question a lot too, just sort of how can you make yourself stand out? What are they really looking for?
So I think we can't talk about that question enough, honestly, because especially in a market like right now, where there are a lot of people who are, the pandemic, there are a lot of people who changed careers or lost their job. There's a lot of different things. We've got new graduates, all kinds of stuff. So the job market it's very flooded right now, let's be honest. And that means it's very competitive. So I think one of the main things that you can do, and I know I've said this, I probably sound like a broken record, so forgive me, folks, but one of the main things that you can do is to tailor your resume, your cover letter to that position. Again, it's not, lying or stretching the truth or anything. It's just making sure that your skills, that they see the skills that you have, the knowledge, the capabilities, everything that you have, and how it is applicable to the organization and to this position that you're looking for. I can't say that enough, because the problem is, especially if you've been looking for a long time or you've been applying to a high volume of jobs, you have your one resume and you're just putting it out there. You're putting it out there, and it's the same resume every time. And unfortunately, that means it's generic. It's a kind of a generic resume. It doesn't necessarily stand out. So I cannot overemphasize the use of kind of keywords and common language. So, and particularly in a cover letter in a very competitive environment or in an organization that is very values driven, spend some time, go to the website, look at what their values are, what some of their organizational goals are, and tie that in your cover letter, so that you can say, I was very attracted by your values, or even congratulations on your big contract that you won last year. I cannot overemphasize the importance of customization and of doing some research about an organization. Something else too, to kind of get your information to stand out, LinkedIn. I will definitely say LinkedIn is your friend. Make connections with some companies, with some folks at the company if it's appropriate. Join some of the groups that you see people in, just so that you can kind of start networking and building that bridge, so that when your resume comes across their desk, so to speak, they go, you know what, that name's really familiar. Oh, they're in that project management group in LinkedIn. Okay, great. So definitely get it out there. And two, make sure your LinkedIn's up to date. Make sure that your LinkedIn, it doesn't have to match exactly with your resume, because again, your resume is customized, but it needs to align. I can't tell you how many folks have very outdated information or very minimal information on LinkedIn, and it kind of doesn't go with what they have on their resume. And just know that people are probably going to go look.
That was my next question for you, was how often do recruiters, and I know you can't speak for all recruiters, but in general, do recruiters pretty typically look applicants up on LinkedIn, out of curiosity?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that most recruiters do, particularly for more professional level positions. They're going to look at LinkedIn. They're going to look and see if you have recommendations from previous coworkers or clients. So I would definitely say reach out to people you've worked with and ask them for a recommendation. Would you feel comfortable writing me a recommendation on LinkedIn? Again, it's those small details that can really help you stand out as an applicant. And it can even help them go, you know what, the recruiter might say, I don't know that this person's the right fit for this one job that they applied for, but I have another one. And seeing their stuff on LinkedIn and seeing their resume and application, I think they'd be a great fit for that. So just because they don't necessarily want you for the job you've applied for, that doesn't mean the door is closed. So try to kind of build on that if you can, make those connections. I cannot stress the importance of that enough, because again, with so many people out in the market right now looking to start a new career or, switch companies, anything that you can do to stand out is just going to definitely help you shine.
That's great. Wow, I just had a question and I completely forgot it about LinkedIn. So it's great to know that they do, especially for those sort of higher level positions, they will probably, look you up on LinkedIn out of curiosity. Is it, when you were talking earlier about profiles being incongruent or out of date from what they've been submitting in an application, is that frowned upon? Is that sort of looked at and gone, I'm not really sure about this person?
So again, we kind of expect that there's going to be a little difference, because the expectation, at least from the HR side of the house, is that you're going to customize your resume and you're going to customize your cover letter when you're applying for our position. So we don't need them to match exactly. It doesn't have to be exactly the same language and words. LinkedIn is typically more of a very brief summary, but they're going to look at dates and they're going to say, hey, why are these 3 jobs that are on LinkedIn not on the resume? That might be a red flag. So you do kind of want to make sure that it meshes up. And this sounds crazy, guys, and you're going to say, Sarah, I knew this, but proofread, have someone else look at your stuff too, be it on LinkedIn, be it on your resume, application. Those small errors, particularly in a position that has a need for great attention for detail, that is a very minor thing that can just halt the process in its tracks. So you want to just make sure that it makes sense, it's crisp, that you've got the correct grammar and language in there, no typos, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you are preaching. Regarding LinkedIn, good idea to have a pic on your LinkedIn profile.
So there's, I wouldn't say that is a good idea or a bad idea, but what I will say is this: if you have a picture on your LinkedIn, please make sure that it is professional. I kid you not, I have seen people with bikini pictures on LinkedIn. It's fine if it's you and your dog, that's great. That can be absolutely professional. You do want a little bit of your personality to shine through if possible, but just be very careful about that. Bikini picture, probably not great, probably not going to help you. So if you choose to have a picture, just make sure that it's professional and appropriate. That's all I would say. But no, I don't think it's going to hurt or help you to have a picture or not, because many people choose not to.
Okay, that's I have not heard that perspective, so I appreciate that. About LinkedIn, and we can wrap up here in a few minutes. So if you have any last questions, please throw them in the chat. But regarding LinkedIn, so I don't know if you have experience with this part or if you just know other HR colleagues who do. But I'm wondering if you know much about, so the application feature on LinkedIn, because they do have their own job search portal. People often wonder, to me, if I apply on LinkedIn, especially that quick apply, do the recruiters actually see those applications, or is that just a place where applications are funneled and they don't really get looked at?
So that's a really good question. And I would say when you see a job posted on LinkedIn, so just as an example, for my organization, when we post a job, it feeds to LinkedIn. But in our postings, we make it very clear we do not want your application through LinkedIn. We want you to use our hiring portal so that you can be in our applicant tracking system. So all I would say is to read that very carefully. Some companies very much use LinkedIn Recruiting, and that is one of the main systems they use, and you're welcome to apply there. But if a company doesn't, it will say, please do not use, the LinkedIn application link please go to our website. So just read that carefully, because if they don't use that and you submit it that way, they're going to say, okay, this person can't read instructions. They didn't take the time to look at this. And B, they're not going to see it because that's not what they're using LinkedIn for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would say it all depends, and just check and see what they have posted, how they're asking you to apply.
Yeah. Okay. Do you ever recommend, like, if you, so, because a lot of folks, that's one of their main ways that they use to look for opportunities, even if they choose to apply on LinkedIn or on the actual job site. Do you recommend with places like LinkedIn and even Indeed and some of the other bigger sites, do you recommend cross-referencing? So if you find a job, so say I found a job at VCU Health that I was interested in, would you recommend that I cross-reference with the VCU Health job site to make sure, see, is that position still posted, other additional details?
Absolutely. If a job is posted on, say, LinkedIn and on the company's website, I would recommend that you go to the company's website. So first off, while people very much use LinkedIn, they also use their applicant tracking systems, right? They use their internal sites, and the internal site has a delay when it feeds to LinkedIn. So you might see a job that's there, but not on the company website because the company website's change hasn't flowed over yet. So I would recommend, if you want to be sure that that job is posted, particularly if it's one that's been out there for a while, go to the website for the company themselves just to verify that it is still out there, because sometimes that feed can break down between LinkedIn and the applicant tracking system.
Okay. I didn't realize that there with some systems, I guess there can be an automatic feed. So that's also very helpful to know. So, well, that is, as we're wrapping things up, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat or raise your hand. But that's all that I have. So I really appreciate, Sarah, being here with us today, and helping to, answer some of these very specific, I know they were very specific questions, but I think they're things that are on a lot of folks' minds. So thank you very much for being here and doing this with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I hope that you all, thank you, Jody. I hope that you all had all of your questions answered, and hopefully you're feeling a little bit better about going out there on the job search and on the application trail there. But again, thanks so much. I will be sending out some information post this event. But again, thank you. I appreciate your comments very much. And so you are very appreciated, Sarah. So thanks again, and I hope you all have a great day, and we will see you soon.